Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. April is over. March felt like it lasted approximately 3,000 years. April felt like it lasted like 3 seconds. I don't know. It just feels like that went faster. But then again, what is time anymore? Do any of us know? I don't. Yeah, this has been kind of a crazy month. I've been ramping back up into reading, but you know, I did a whole video about how to get out of a reading slump, and just generally, I think I've been kind of still working my way out. I'm not quite a full slump, but definitely not being as in the mood to read as I am kind of at other times. So yeah, you know, a lot of comfort reading in April. I think what even happened in April? Oh, I got promoted. That was exciting. Mostly because that makes me feel like I have job security. What else happened? I'm still healing from my surgery. It's taking longer than they thought it would. Of course it is. But I'm trying to be patient. I'm at least not in nearly as much pain as I was. So thank God for that. But yeah, so April kind of still a weird month. I think that's true for everyone. One of the main things that I was working on was my magical readathon owls. So we'll definitely talk about that. And yeah, I had some really big hits this month, but a lot of things that were just sort of okay. And like I said, I think because I've been doing some sort of de-slumping reading, that accounts for a lot of why some of that was only just okay. So with all that being said, let's dive into some statistics, and then we'll talk about my hits, my surprises, and my disappointments, which will be an interesting, I'm not sure, we'll see what I end up talking about. How about that? Okay, so actually I read more books in April than I did in March, but they were not as long. So, and I also have things in progress. I don't know, guys. It's kind of a mess. Anyway, I read 15 books in March. April. We're in April now. Oh my gosh. Get it together. Okay. I read 15 books in April. 10 of those I owned. 5 of them I got either from the library or through a subscription service. And I read 3,649 pages, which was less than in March. Average page count was 244. That makes sense. I read some shorter things, kind of on purpose as a part of detox plan. The average age of book I read was 10 years old, and the average time that it had been on my TBR was 1.5 months. So there you go. I also had definitely a very strong mix towards romance, which makes sense because 5 of the books I read were arcs, and often I have a lot of romance in arcs, but then also as I was comfort reading, that was a big mix of that because I had a lot of Kindle Unlimited type things I was getting to. But you know, I had a little fantasy, a little mystery, a little sci-fi also thrown in the mix. So that makes sense in terms of just sort of overall how this month went. And then rating wise, like I said, a lot of things that were just kind of okay. I had 1 2-star, 5 3 stars, and 6 3.5 stars. So let's see, 12 of the things I read were between a C and a B plus, BB plus kind of thing. So just sort of average, I think, but I did have 1 4-star and 2 4.5s. So we can talk about those. My average rating though, however, was only 3.4. So those are my overall stats. And then talking about specific challenges that I made progress on this month. Let's see here. We'll just do all of my owls together. I did read The Deep by River Solomon and The Test by Sylvain Neuvel for my Operation Sci-Fi Challenge, which you guys have finally seen the first installment of, so I can just say this. I'm reading all of the 2019 sci-fi nominees just to kind of expand my vocabulary about what I do and don't like about sci-fi. So those 2 were on the list. I picked 2 short ones for this month, which was good. So I did that. And then a couple of We Need Diverse Romance picks, Island Affair by Priscilla Oliveras. And I thought that was really cute. It was, if you don't like, you have to kind of go with the plot. So if you can't go with the plot setup, you won't like this one. But I thought it was really cute. And then Real Men Knit by Kwana Jackson was my other one. And I'm going to talk about that one in a different category. So I think those were all of my non-owls challenges. So to get to my owls challenge, I am very pleased to tell you that I did read all 7 things I wanted to read for this. Now I say that I met 7 prompts that will set me up for the careers that I have my eye on for Newts later in the year. I did have 1 swap out, so we can talk about that, but I did read all 7 prompts. So For charms, I read Whiteout by Adriana Anders. I gave that 3 stars. Defense Against the Dark Arts, I read The Deep by River Solomon. I gave 3.5 stars. Herbology, I read MONSTRESS Volume 4 instead of Maurice by E.M. Forster. I swapped that out because I was just like, I'm not enough out of the slump yet to read Maurice and really get everything out of it. So I swapped that for MONSTRESS, 3.5 stars there. Potions, I did The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne, 3.5 stars there. As you can see, like I was talking about earlier, a lot of things that were just like good, fine to good for me this month, characterized here. Transfiguration, I read Alpha Night by Nalini Singh, 4.5 stars. Ancient Runes, I read Love Lettering by Kate Clayborn, 3.5 stars. And then Muggle Studies, I read Beach Read by Emily Henry, also 4.5 stars. So I did get through these, and I'll talk more about some of these in my upcoming categories. But I was very happy. This was like the one bit of structure of reading this month that I had, aside from just reading some arcs that I needed to get to. And, you know, I was proud of myself for at least staying on task for this. So there you go. So those were all of my stats and my challenge updates. So let's get into my hits, my surprises, and my disappointments. I guess we'll start with disappointments. Okay, 3 things that I'm calling disappointing, 2 of which are fine and 1 of which I had some real problems with. Whiteout by Adriana Anders, I gave 3 stars to, and I call this a disappointment just because I really liked the idea of this as a romantic suspense, or kind of like a romantic action adventure kind of thing. So the setup is there's some people down on a base in Antarctica, like a research base, and it's the switching of the summer crew from the winter crew. In the midst of that happening, bad guys come, kill a bunch of people. 2 people manage to escape, and they take the thing that the bad guys came to steal with them. And so it becomes like a survival thing. They're trying to get to another base on Antarctica, and it's not very clear that they will be able to make it with the supplies and speed that they have. So I thought that was like a really cool setup, and all of the parts around that bit of the plot I actually liked pretty well. The problem is that this was really more of like a romantic action adventure thing, and the romantic piece I think just was really not my favorite. I didn't really buy how the 2 people got together. I didn't really buy their connection, and this does have a pretty egregious case of danger boning, meaning like, okay, if you're in the middle of Antarctica in the winter and you are trying to survive, are you really gonna be getting it on? Are you really like gonna find a way to get down? I mean, these people do, and I think the author at least like made enough of an attempt to make it not like impossible. But I just didn't really buy that. I just didn't buy their connection. So that, you know, that was like not a small part of the book. And so I just didn't love that bit. So that was disappointing. Another disappointing one to me was Real Men Knit by Kwana Jackson. And this, again, I guess both of these 2, the critique is sort of like of genre and how much the book met my genre expectations. So Real Men Knit by Kwana Jackson I actually think is a really solid book, and I think part of what I want to get out in this is to set people's expectations so maybe they can enjoy it more than I did. So I ended up only being able to give this one 3 stars because it's supposed to be a contemporary romance, and as a romance I don't know that it was all that successful to me. But as like a family drama, I really liked that bit, and I think that bit was more like 4 stars. It was just the romance piece that I just thought really kind of let it down, because the dude in the romance, I think, is just not that likable for me, or I don't really know what the right word is. I didn't buy him as a romantic lead. I wasn't really rooting for him to get with the main girl, because I just didn't think he didn't demonstrate to me enough that he like was changing or becoming the man he needed to be to show up for her. So in that respect, I didn't like him as a character, but just as a character in a family drama, I would have liked him just fine, because he was interesting. He's like the youngest of this adopted, you know, quartet of brothers. They're all adopted by Mama Joy. She passes away, and I really liked all that bit of like grief and like how families deal with grief. But anyway, he's the youngest, and his kind of reputation is as like the irresponsible one. And so this is sort of a book about him kind of like growing up in a lot of ways. And I basically just wanted the heroine to have someone who didn't need to grow up. Like, I just wanted her to have someone who was already kind of closer to being great. I don't know. So anyway, all that to say, the writing in this I think was good. Again, though, the style I didn't feel like was it didn't remind me of a romance. It reminded me more just of sort of like general fiction. So maybe I recommend this book, like, if you go into it sort of with more of the mindset of it being general fiction as opposed to a romance. I guess that's kind of where I land. But it is going to be our We Need Diverse Romance pick for June. Oh, I put up the thread, by the way, for Girl Gone Viral. That's our pick for May. But for June, we're still going to do this one. And I actually really want to hear what people have to say and let me know if they think I'm like not giving him enough credit, or I don't know. I would just be interested to hear people's response to this one, because I think it's not a bad book. I just think my expectations and what I wanted from it didn't get quite met. I don't know. You can hear my ambivalence, because I'm like, I'm intrigued by this. I would definitely try more from the author because I thought that it was solid. Yeah. Anyway, it was a little bit of a disappointment, but only because I really wanted to just fully love it. And then my last disappointment is His Sweetest Sin by MINK. Now, I read a book from her this month that I thought was really fun called Stuff. And then I also read His Sweetest Sin. And this one just didn't work for me because it was too taboo and it didn't fully reckon with the taboo elements enough to my liking. Basically, this is like story of a priest, a girl in his congregation, but she's not Catholic. She's not really one of his congregants, but just the inherent like power structures in this made me really uncomfortable. I do think the author was like aware of that, and I think tried to have ways around it. It did not work for me. And I think especially just like frankly, and I mean, I say this as a non-Catholic, so I want to be deferential, but just frankly, the number of scandals that church has produced specifically around priests abusing power, I needed a lot more to not feel weird about that part of the book. So I gave it 2 stars because I think it could have been handled worse, but I don't think it was handled well enough. And also just like, I'm just not somebody who's super into the really dark romances or the really taboo romances. It's just not my favorite. So I'm sure that's also part of it. It's just like already a little bit out of my wheelhouse or comfort zone. And so with that element thrown in, I was just like, I just don't, when I'm like trying to have some escapist fun, I just don't need to think about all the scandals that the Catholic Church has been embroiled in the last however many years because of priests abusing their power. I just don't need that. Okay, and then 2 surprises I wanted to talk about. First, The Test by Sylvain Neuvel. Now, I really like this book. I gave it 4 stars, and the only reason I wanted to mention it as a surprise was that I'd actually checked it out last year from the library. Oh, baby, what's wrong? Can you hear my kitty meowing? I don't know why he's upset, but I checked it out last year from the library, and I read the first chapter and just like wasn't really like, I just didn't get sucked in. And then it went back, and so I just sort of wrote it off a little bit of like, okay, whatever, I guess I'm just not that into that. But I had to read it for Operation Sci-Fi, so I picked it up and I was like, okay, this is short, so if nothing else, it won't be hard to get through. I love this. I thought it was, love is too strong. Because it's not like a favorite of the year or an all-time favorite, but I really, really enjoyed this and really would recommend it. I just thought that it was really surprising. I think it was a really good example of how to tell a really impactful, interesting story in a short amount of time. I think that it did just enough world building and just enough character development to make it interesting. I thought the ending was sufficiently, like satisfying and kind of dark. Like, I liked the way it ended. All around, this was a book that I ended up really enjoying. And it's just a little bit of a surprise because it hadn't hooked me in enough to get through it on my first attempt with it. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. The other surprise I wanted to mention was love lettering. And that's because this is a book where the writing, I don't know how to talk about this book. I gave it 3.5 stars and I would recommend it. It's just hard for me to like get my head around how to think about it because the writing, it kind of reminds me of like Christina Lauren's new adult books. It reminds me of that, where it's very stylized. Like, it's got definitely a voice, and it's one that I can appreciate but doesn't fully register with me. Like, there's something a little off about it to me. Some of it is that it's first person present, which I'm not really that big of a fan of in principle. So, I was kind of struggling with that. It is definitely a romance. I think what it is that it's a romance that reads like women's fiction, And I never really know how to wrap my head around that. And I was kind of on the fence with it. I was leaning towards a 3-star, because I was like, okay, this is good. But I actually really liked the way that this one ended, and it surprised me. Like, it kind of bought the rest of the book back for me a little bit. So I very much liked the way that the ending of this one unfolds. And I will say that I think there's an emotional intensity in this book that was really well done. It made the sex scenes pretty steamy because of that, I thought, or like intense. Like they had an emotional intensity throughout the book, and then when you get to the sex scenes, that also translates, which I think, you know, good on Kate Clayborn for being able to do that. And then there's a love letter in this that I thought was really good, and just generally I very much like the ending. So this is one where I was kind of leaning towards fine. I was feeling kind of ambivalent about it, but the ending really kind of like made it better to me. I guess in some ways this is sort of like Real Men Knit, in that the ending of Real Men Knit did not make up the rest of the book to me, so that's why I stayed at 3 stars. Whereas this one, the ending did kind of like make up some ground for me, and therefore I could give it 3.5. I don't know. Anyway, this just kind of surprised me, because I was like, I don't totally know how to articulate how I feel about this. I don't know. If you've read this book, let me know if any of that made sense to you, what I was trying to communicate here. Okay, and then we get to hits, and really there's just like 2 clear winners. Now, I could have put The Test in the hit category because I gave it 4 stars and I did really like it. 2 4.5s this month, and they were heads and shoulders above everything else I was reading, I feel like. So first of all, Beach Read by Emily Henry. I really enjoyed this book. I thought that it was just like a very lovely ethereal voice. I've never read anything from Emily Henry before. It has a very light quality to it, which makes sense. I believe she comes from the world of YA writing, or like YA contemporaries. And I think it brings some of that flavor of writing into an adult romance, which I think really worked nicely. I think that it's quite funny. I really resonated with the humor in this one. I like that a lot. I also really liked the conflict in this, in terms of the heroine's journey. She is very strongly identified with her parents and them as a little family unit of 3. That was like very formative to her sense of self and kind of her identity as a unit, a part of that unit. And upon the death of her father, and you find this out like within the first chapter, so I don't feel like this is a spoiler. Upon the death of her father, she finds out that he had basically a second life. He had a second partner, and he left her this beach house, and that was where he would basically like live with this woman. And she finds out that her mom knew about this, and her mom had cancer, and he was doing this while she had cancer, and like, it was a whole thing. It was a lot. So, I mean, it was extreme, but I liked how that gave an occasion to flesh out ideas about how we conceptualize ourselves in different kind of like social units, and how if that changes, that can be really impactful to us. So I just thought that it was an interesting, well done conflict internally for her. And then I really liked the sort of like slow burny, kind of hate to love, not really, more just sort of like annoyance to love, I think was one of the categories I've made up for that. Antipathy to love. I think that was really well executed in this. And I really enjoyed the relationship and the way it kind of bloomed between the 2 main characters. So overall, I really enjoyed this one, really recommend it. I think the full release is happening in May. It came out early as a Book of the Month Club pick. I had an arc of it, so whatever. I know people have started to read it because of those things, but it fully comes out in May. And I just think it was really well done, and I very much enjoyed it. And I wasn't totally sure. I wasn't sure if it was going to be too women's fiction-y for me. It's not. It's definitely a romance, and yeah, I just thought it was really, really well done. And then my other 4.5 star is Alpha Knight. I feel like I already gushed about this in my mid-month check-in, so I basically will just tell you, I absolutely thought this was a great installment. I don't think it was as good as Wolf Rain last year, but it was still really, really good. It's probably my favorite arc that I've read this year. Yeah, it's my favorite arc so far that I've read, and just really satisfying. If you were a reader of the Psy Changeling series, I do not think you will be disappointed. I definitely wasn't. I'm also kind of a sucker for the Psy dudes with the Changeling heroines. That's a combo I always enjoy, and I just think this one had a lot of really interesting gender dynamic stuff. All in all, really, really good. Saying all this kind of makes me want to go reread it. I kind of feel like I might want to reread the Psy Changeling series in general. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. But all that to say, I think that was probably my favorite thing I read this month. And really, those 2, Beach Read and Alpha Knight, were clearly the 2 like winners of what I read this month. So yeah, I think that wraps up April. A kind of a slow, little bit of a sluggish reading month for me, getting back in the groove still. And I think I've yet to really find my mojo and rhythm of reading during shelter in place. I don't know. I think when I was going to work every day, it created like this clear delineation of like, I'm at work, now I'm home. And when I got home, part of the eagerness to get home and get settled in was to read a book. And I just haven't found myself doing that as much since I don't have a commute. I don't know why. It's harder for me to like settle in and focus. The thing is, when I do that, I really enjoy it. So you would think that I would just make it a priority to do it more. I don't know. So all that to say, still kind of finding my groove there. We'll see if May goes better. I am working from home till at least probably the beginning of July, just based on how my company is following Nashville's shelter in place protocol. So I've got 2 more months to kind of figure out how to make this work at least. So stay tuned. Anyway, let me know how your April reading went. If you're kind of like me and still trying to figure out how to balance it all, or how to fit reading in, even though you have all this time for whatever reason. Hard to do. But yeah, I think that will do it for now. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you are having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!